Hi there, welcome, and a special welcome to Sally. Sally, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I'm Sally Taylor. I'm based in Poole. I'm a part-time house for duty pioneer curate type person in the Anglican Church. But my parish is in Hamworthy and Turlingmore. I've been here since late August. And yeah, so I'm really loving what's happening here, and I'm also working for Poole missional communities as well, so that's part of my role. So it's a lovely interlinking of lots of different strands and seeing what God is doing here. So yeah, I'm married to James. He is a chaplain in Poole Hospital and Dorset Hospital, and I've got 3 kids and mad dog and chickens and things.
Oh wow,
So,
mad chickens sound good. Yeah.
Well, yeah. The dog is more mad than the chickens, but yeah, they're great. They're really great. So yeah, so I haven't been here very long, and just enjoying what I'm doing and seeing what God's doing. So yeah, really good.
And so you. I remember one of the sermons I heard you preach when I was when I was at your church once. You were talking about creativity. Is that something that's so important to you? The whole creating.
I think I think it's about, my passion is about enabling people to be all that they can be, all that God has called them to be, because every single person is different on this planet and has a unique gifting, a unique way of looking at the world, a unique kind of approach to God, and creativity amongst that. And I think part of my journey really to this point has been people who've seen what God sees within me, and encourage that out. And I think we need those people. So I'm really passionate about enabling people to encourage others to see what, basically be discerning what is within us all, so that we can be all that we're called to be. And I don't think there's enough people doing that. So that's like a real thing for me.
Seeing and nurturing potential and releasing potential and that sort of mine probably looks different to that, but I think it still has its root in the same thing of who's God called you to be, what's God put inside you, and how can we
exactly. So yeah, when I preached that Sunday, I shared a little bit about a poem that was written by Marianne Williamson. She's American. And she talks about kind of all of us being children of God and born to make manifest the glory of God that's within us. And I love that. Yeah. And I think, that kind of comes into all of who we are. We're all called to carry that light and to show it to others. So yeah, that's a big part. And the creativity part comes into that because we're all made uniquely. So we're all going to express our praise, our worship in different ways, and how we honour God, how we honour other people, and it's all kind of part of our worship lifestyle, if you like.
Because I guess that idea of work, we often think of worship as just singing, really, don't we? Often, And actually, interestingly, with lockdown, we haven't been able to sing, and I wonder, and that's meant, or at least singing's been very much curtailed, or we have to do it with a mask on. We have to, it's been, So it's almost that. I wonder whether this is going to mean that as we come out of lockdown, maybe there's a greater creativity in how we worship.
I think so, because I think I think we are made to worship, and we often put it in a bit of a box that is just worship on a Sunday in a building, led by a band or by an organ, and that's kind of it. But actually, I think it should be our whole lives. And so that's what we've been looking at a little bit, like prayer as worship as well, that actually, rather than having like a list of people to pray for and ways to do that, just to come into God's presence and go, wow, we are so, it's so awesome that we can be in his presence, and prayer be a part of our worship. And I think not being able to sing has challenged a lot of people, because they thought, well, that's the only way I can worship, but that, it's so much broader and wider. And I often think of like monastery life, that a lot, there's been a lot of writings from years and years ago about worshipping God through everyday stuff. Like peeling the carrots to washing up, like actually it's like an expression of our love for the Lord, like in all that we do, and that kind of blows my mind. I'm not there at all yet, but
I'm miles away from there. But
me too.
Wasn't it Brother Lawrence who talked about that idea about practicing the presence of God as that habitual idea of God with us, of Christ with us, that perpetual thing? And I guess there's also, wasn't it St. Paul said about in Romans 12 about offer your souls and bodies as living sacrifices. This is your spiritual act of worship. So actually, our worship actually is all that we do, is who we are. For God, it's our whole life. Every bit of it is worship, which is a radically different way of thinking about it. Really,
it is. I think we kind of often, as Christians, we've kind of come to look to Sunday for our kind of, that's our worship experience for the week. But actually, it's the rest of the time. It's all of who we are, really. So that kind of whole, and also like kind of thinking of how we care for the world, how we outlive our lives to our families, to our friends. Like, it's a very different approach, and I'm not at all there, but I'm being quite challenged by this.
When I was at college a long time ago now, because I'm old, but I had to write this essay about worship, and I'm not very good at Greek. In fact, I'm awful.
I've got no Greek at all. You're better than me, I'm sure.
I remember saying to my Greek lecturer, the only Greek word I know is kebab, and she said that's Turkish, and that more or less set the level, really. But there's that verse in the Bible that says the religion that God finds acceptable is to look after widows and orphans, and in their distress. And the word religion and worship, actually, I found out from my Greek dictionary, actually have the same. That's an adequate translation. So, to worship God finds acceptable is to look out for widows and orphans. I was thinking, actually, it's not so much about the widows and orphans. Actually, it's about who are the widows and orphans in our society. Who are 21st century widows and orphans? I guess it means the people who are vulnerable, the people who are having a tough time, the people who are
struggling along. Definitely. And I think, and that is how we are as Christians. It's outworking into all the stuff that we do, into whatever we do. It's that sense of worship to God, and then I think people see that light within us. It's like, I don't know who it was, but it might have been Augustine or somebody said, preach the gospel always, but if necessary, use words. And I love that, because I think it should be so obvious like who we are. It's not often, like, I think for me, I think, well, I'm often a bit grumpy and whatever, but the reality is that's what we're called to, I think.
Actually, the opposite works, isn't it? Sometimes it's what's it, someone else said, I can't hear what you're saying because your life is too loud. Like your words, that idea that our words and our works and the wonders that God does through them need to all be harmonized together. Otherwise, if they're massive contradictions, we almost validate our own story. Really, we're not worshipping.
Exactly. I was reading the other day about I always have a bit of a passion about John Wesley and people, great guys of the faith, and like Whitfield, people like that. But he, John Wesley, when he was at university, him and Whitfield and a few others, they set up this thing called the Holy Club, and they had like all these searching questions that they would ask each other about their lifestyle and how they did their life, and it was really practical stuff. But it's things like, how are you getting on with your friends? Like, have you got issues you need to, like, it's really kind of modern in that sense, but it's all about kind of our life and who we are, reflecting the light of Christ. And actually then, then people kind of see what Jesus is about. And I was just really interested, because I thought quite often we're not, as a culture, we don't like to kind of go, well, I'm not sure about that, but we kind of think we're called to live holy lives, and that's quite a challenge in the environment we're in, I think, at the moment.
Thinking, well, how does this look like as a friend, as a dad, as a sibling, as a cousin, as a colleague, as a whatever role we're in, really. Actually, holiness actually's got to work in the way that we're.
Exactly, everything, the outworking of everything. So I think it is mind-blowingly challenging.
I suppose taking the other thing you said about that, who we are, because that whole idea about, going back to Paul's idea about the spiritual act of worship, it also says earlier in the passage, don't let the world, I think this is Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. And I certainly found when I was at college or started doing vicaring, there's definitely a mold or expectations or people want you to be a certain way, and actually surely God's created me to be me, and actually how to resist the cookie cutter that says I need to be like this or like this or like that.
Yeah, definitely.
To be me, doing what God's called me to do. I haven't got an answer to that really. I don't know if you've got thoughts on that really.
I think it's about finding people who can support you to be you. Because I think, definitely for me, going through the kind of Anglican training scenario, and I didn't quite fit into pioneer or kind of straightforward ministry. I kind of almost had one foot in both camps, and often felt like I was, kind of a voice saying things that were not understood, or just it was me saying it, and it was like, oh well, that's Sally, and and that's quite a lonely place. So I think we've got to be looking out for people and gathering like-minded people in that way, and allowing them to have that voice, and to be valuing difference and valuing breadth. And I think the church is changing as well. I think the pandemic has kind of been a catalyst for people being more open to difference. But I think it's about owning what you're called to do, and you do need people who are going to support you in that. I think it's really, really important. Otherwise it's a very lonely trail, and you can just give up, and I think
sometimes we can get squashed a bit in that as well, actually. I think we can keep on saying discouraging things, and it's harder to get back up and harder to keep saying them. And sometimes you think, oh, I'll just bite my tongue, I'll just spit this one out, I won't fight this battle. And actually we end up sort of not being all that God's called us to be, all that we should be, all that what God longs to see happen doesn't always happen because we don't feel empowered or enabled or equipped to do that, really. Exactly. One of the great tragedies that happens sometimes.
I think it does within big institutions, where there's been a status quo and how things are done, and if you bring a bit of challenge to that's not comfortable. None of us like to be challenged about the ways we look at things or the ideas that we have, and if you have a bigger institution that's been going a certain way for a long time, to have people who kind of a little bit niggly on the side, it's not comfortable. So I totally get why people don't want to, why quite often it's a bit kind of awkward, but I think the way the world is going, the changes that have happened because of COVID, I think it's an amazing opportunity for the church to be brave, and to think boldly, and to just kind of reform in a way of thinking, what are we doing and why are we doing it, and what is God calling us to be and do in this time, and that's going to be different in every context, but there are some fundamentals that that could be looked at. And I think in many dioceses around the place, people are being braver and thinking more missionally, thinking about all sorts of different ways to do ministry, and that's brilliant. So
so maybe there's something also about sort of being if you feel like you've got a bit of a prophetic voice, or a voice that says things that maybe people don't want to hear, that kind of might be just keep on saying them, people say it again, even though it feels like no one's listening, say it one more time,
and I think that's part of my calling, is kind of bringing the challenge, and that's really uncomfortable. And my upbringing was to not really be that person who would say the difficult thing. So it's really interesting, isn't it? I think I was saying this to someone the other day. I think that if you look at the kind of thing that was most contended over growing up, or you kind of developing as a person, that's probably the thing that God is calling you to, because there's most battle over the thing that's almost squashed in you. So you need people to see that and to be able to go, no, that's what God's calling you. Because I kind of grew up been very quiet and in the background and for lots of different reasons. And it's just really interesting. And then that again is kind of one of my, let's look at what is God calling you to. Probably the biggest battle is over that, because the enemy doesn't want that to happen.
And
but
so it's that valuing that God has made you. Because for me, I had a real massive thing about realizing that God could actually use me. I sort of believed hypothetically that God could use me, because I knew God could use anybody, and God even uses a donkey and all that sort of malarkey. But I actually believed that he really actually could and did and does was mind-blowing for me. But I think we don't actually believe that God can and will and wants to. It's almost like this thing that he uses other people. Oh yeah, he uses
exactly.
but he's not going to actually use me.
No, and it took me so long to believe that God was calling me to this, whatever this role is. And it took a lot of people to go, for goodness sake, like, I've had dreams about you being, being ordained and all that. I'm like, really? And I remember my old vicar, who was brilliant in all of this, but he said, Sally, you're the sort of person, if God wrote you a letter saying, Dear Sally Taylor, I would like you to be ordained in the Church of England, you'd still discount it. And I was like, yes, I would, Matthew.
That's a bit loud.
So, because I think it takes a lot of guts sometimes, and when you have been somebody at the back of church and you think, I haven't got anything to offer, and then but actually God always has a plan for all of us, whatever that is, and that's a real kind of, and I think sometimes we look in the wrong places for leaders. We often look at the people who are up the front and kind of pushing themselves forward, and actually probably biblically we should look at the back. Because if you look at people like David, he was the youngest. He wasn't even around when they were looking for the next leader, and that is something
I put something slightly. I've got a book coming out, and I put something in there about, I can't remember what I called it now. Was it Crowning King Eliab? I think is the name of the oldest brother, and saying that if it had been up to us, would have crowned the oldest brother. Straight away it would have, been would have said, oh, this is a no-brainer. And we completely missed the person that God had called. And I think that's a dangerous challenge, really. But actually it's trusting that God, even though it doesn't look sensible, actually God's way actually is the best way, and God's way works.
It is.
Also that whole thing about broken systems as well, actually, that we often try and make something work because we think it ought to, rather than actually saying, well, God, what are you calling us to do? And actually you're maybe taking a city by singing around it wasn't a great strategy, but God's way worked. Or by blasting a rock, but God's ways work. And that idea that actually, God, you know what you're doing, and actually when we step out in faith, you are trustworthy and you do bring the fruit.
Exactly. And that's a real challenge, because again, I think we're influenced by culture and success and onwards and upwards, and even within Christianity, I think that's become a little bit a part of our culture, that it's about numbers and success and whatever. But actually God's kingdom is upside down. It's totally the opposite to the way the world works. We've got to keep coming back to that. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Like, it's totally different to what even sometimes what the church believes. So we kind of got to get back to that kind of outlandish grace that God is about. And I think coming back to people who are prophets and kind of looking at all the different roles that God calls us into, that would be great to see more of that.
That's that fivefold ministry.
Fivefold mission, ministry,
apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers and shepherds or pastors. Because we never talk about that very often. People have this idea of a pastor or vicar minister to mean the one who leads the church, and you never really, and the sort of apostles, prophets, evangelists, we often don't talk about so much. But churches, we sort of largely talk about, we want our vicar, in inverted commas, to teach a bit on Sunday morning, be nice to us. But that whole slightly more edgy stuff about, what's it mean to be apostolic, to hear the heart of God? What does it mean to be prophetic and speak God's voice? What does it mean to be evangelistic and give good news to other people? That's at the heart of the sort of kingdom DNA, really. And
it is. And I think, we can't look to one person always to fulfill all of that, because I think quite often the vicar or the pastor feels like that they've got to be all of that, but it's not realistic. or fair.
Be omnicompetent, can they?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and again, I think there has been a lack of, identifying those giftings in a way. We focused on the teacher pastor a lot, but we haven't focused so much on, apostles, people who are like really bold, who have visions, who really run with that, and the prophets who are going to say uncomfortable things that people may not always want to hear, but it's important that we hear it. And I think, that's something that an evangelist, rather than kind of saying, oh, will you just do that thing over there, actually really valuing what they're doing. And, really, I think it's just all part of us functioning of the body of Christ. And, hopefully coming out of lockdown is more of an awareness that we can all offer something, and we're all just part of, we're all level, we're all equal, and we've all been made uniquely, and we've got to discover what that is and run with that. I
wonder if there's something with that interdependence idea that that actually the body needs each other. If I were an ear, how would you see if the whole body was a foot? How would it
and I think
I
can't remember where I read it or heard it, but somebody was saying about that within the church, like if you don't have a leg, for instance, you can't easily stand up, and it's the sense, if we don't have evangelists or we don't have apostles, we're all like kind of unbalanced, and and I found that really interesting, and why we end up getting focused on one thing more than another,
because we need different lenses to actually give us a full vision. I wonder whether there's something too about the nature of interdependence being the fact that actually God deliberately hasn't given one person in the church anything, but actually he says, actually the only way that you're going to be all that I want you to be is if you work together. But actually it's almost a bit like it's almost scattered the gifts amongst his people, so that when we come together we have something beautiful, but actually we can't do it on our own. We need the togetherness.
No, exactly.
And that fits in with that whole idea of where there's unity, God commands a blessing.
Definitely there's a real power with unity, I think. And I think community, like, we are made for community. We're made to operate together, sharing the realities of knowing Christ amongst us in all different ways. And if we're out of community, that is very hard, but modeling community and how we do that in a new kind of scenario now, we're not all living in villages where everyone knows each other, we're not always knowing our neighbours, even as churches we're scattered sometimes. And what does that look like in the now, but we're made to support each other and encourage each other and enable each other.
So as we come out of lockdown and we're thinking about interdependence and discovering God's call in your life and knowing afresh who you are, and a challenge to think and be different, what do you think God's saying to us with all, as we emerge from one thing into a slightly unknown new future? What would you
I mean, I think it's a brave time. I think it's a time of kind of reforming, reimagining. Like, I think of kind of the potter's wheel, and like, if we were to totally give however God wanted the shape to be of church, what would that look like now? And that, I think that was what I would want to say, that kind of, that challenge of, are we brave enough to let God take the reins and redirect us in new paths, new ways, maybe looking back to, really ancient ways, but also, thinking about how we, what do we do with our buildings? Do we need them? Do we need to change stuff radically? I think it's a really brave time, and we, but I'm really hoping people, I think there are a lot of people who are thinking creatively and differently about what church is, but I think also there needs to be almost like a back to basics. Why do we meet as Christians? What is church about? What do we think we're doing? Because I think then people would be like, oh, hang on, it isn't necessarily about the building, or it isn't necessarily about this, that and the other. we meet because we're community, we meet because we love the Lord and we want to serve him together, draw out each other's gifts, be his body on earth. That's the basics. And I think we've got very consumed with the add-ons, which over many years. So it's not going to be overnight, but I think it's a great opportunity to think some things will have to die, but there will be new life. And yeah, I think in a strange way, it's an exciting time. In another way, it's a very sad and difficult time. And people will feel both those things. Some people will feel great loss about what has gone and has died, and others will feel excited about what could be. But I think as leaders, it's about enabling people to be braver and to see potential in new, and whilst also honouring kind of honouring heritage, but not so much that it controls what we're doing for the next however many years. We're all doing stuff.
Thank you so much. That's given us a lot to think about. That's been really challenging. So thank you.